The US is trying to both de-escalate the situation and shore up Ukraine's defenses, amid fears Russia could launch an invasion for the second time in less than a decade. For the past few weeks, Russia has built up troops and military hardware near Ukraine's border, and Ukrainian intelligence officials say Moscow has been conducting large-scale military exercises in the separatist-controlled eastern regions. The US is now considering sending military aid to Ukraine, including advisors, equipment, and machinery. Russia claims the US is already doing that, and it's only aggravating tensions. Today, the US and Russia's top generals spoke by phone to discuss several security issues. We don't know what they said on the call, but the Kremlin spokesperson says Russia has no plans to cross Ukraine's borders. CNN senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen is in Dnipro to tell us how Ukraine is preparing for this possible threat. Fred, clearly Ukraine has the most alarmist assessment of Russia's intentions. Their defense and intelligence agency thinks an invasion is coming early next year. Is this alarm warranted, and how are they preparing?
Well, they certainly believe that an invasion could come as early as the beginning of next year, and it certainly is something, Bianca, that they are preparing for. And on the one hand, of course, they do want international support. They do want the support of the U.S. and its allies. But the Ukrainians, quite frankly, are also saying that they're not going to back down, that they are going to stand their ground. Now, there's two things essentially they're doing. On the one hand, they're modernizing their own military, but they're also really improving some of the infrastructure that is going to be key, especially in the east of the country. Here's what we saw.
On patrol in some of the most contested waters in the world, Ukraine's Navy took us on an artillery boat in the Sea of Azov, just as tensions with Russia have reached a boiling point. Our main goal is to defend and keep the sovereignty of Ukraine from the direction of the sea, the captain tells me. Russia has been massing troops near Ukraine's borders, the U.S. says, warning its allies a large-scale invasion could happen soon.
The Ukrainians believe that if Russia does decide to launch an attack, that the Sea of Azov could be one of the main battlegrounds. That's why the Ukrainians are both modernizing their fleet, but also their infrastructure on land as well.
The Azov coastline holds a strategic value to Russia. It would allow President Vladimir Putin to establish a much-sought land corridor to connect Russia to annexed Crimea. Ukraine's defense ministry gave us rare access to the massive construction going on at the Berdyansk naval base. Kiev has now ordered this building program to urgently be accelerated, with the Russian threat looming large.
In order to complete this project as quick as possible, the Ukrainian military tells us they are now working 7 days a week. And they say once it's finished, it will offer a formidable deterrent against any Russian aggression.
Upgrades seem badly needed here, with much of Berdyansk's port in utter disrepair. Ukraine says new facilities will allow them to base more and bigger ships here. We are ready, this officer says. That is why we are here, so that at any time, if there is any aggression in the Azov Sea, we can resist it. Ukraine's president says Russia has positioned close to 100,000 troops near its borders, which the Kremlin denies. These satellite images appearing to show dozens of military vehicles near Yelnya in southwestern Russia. The Biden administration has warned Moscow not to attack and is mulling more weapons deliveries to Kiev. CNN has learned one U.S. defense official says Russia's aim may be to create confusion or to get concessions. The Kremlin dismissed talk of a possible invasion as hysteria, but Vladimir Putin also issued a clear warning.
We need to consider that Western partners worsen the situation by delivering to Kiev modern lethal weapons and provocative exercises in the Black Sea. And not only there, but also other regions close to our borders.
Ukraine's armed forces say they are on constant alert, preparing for an armed confrontation they hope can be avoided.
And Bianca, the Ukrainian military also conducted some Air Force exercises of their own today. And the other thing that they also did is they also drew up a new law that will make it easier for them in the future to draw up to 200,000 reservists should obviously things get worse. Obviously, that is something that everybody here is trying to avoid, and they certainly hope this conflict here does not escalate, Bianca.
And Fred, what do you make of the posturing that we're seeing? How much of this do you think is Russia trying to test the West's resolve in terms of whether or not they would actually militarily intervene if Ukraine was under threat from Russia? Because we hear a lot rhetorically from Biden and from the West about in support of Ukraine. But there is this big question mark as to whether or not they would actually back it up in terms of military support.
Yeah. Well, I think that certainly is a very big question mark, and I think that the Ukrainians also feel that as well. Is that if things if bad does come to worse here, and there is some sort of military conflict or an escalation or some sort of invasion, that they will probably have to fend for themselves, most possibly with new U.S. weapons that they could possibly employ. But in the end, the Ukrainians, you do feel they are building up their own military. They're trying to modernize their own military with that infrastructure, for instance, that we're seeing. Whether or not what we're seeing right now is posturing or not, whether or not this is a real threat that is there or just a military buildup that might, like we've seen at the beginning of this year, at some point go away or the Russians withdraw those forces, it really is very difficult to say. But one of the things that we are feeling here on the ground, we're hearing from officials here on the ground, of course, we're also hearing from officials in the U.S. as well, is they are taking this very seriously. They do believe that the threat is very serious. And I think that's also one of the reasons why you're seeing so much public messaging on the part of the Biden administration, why the Biden administration is, for instance, also warning the U.S.'s allies that this is something that they need to take extremely seriously. And of course, also having some very high-level conversations with the Russians as well. Like, for instance, today, when the U.S. Chief of Staff talked to the Chief of the General Staff of the Russian military, General Gerasimov today, the U.S. trying to drive home that point to the Russians: do not attack Ukraine. The U.S., of course, will be on Ukraine's side. Whether or not that means intervening militarily, of course, that's not necessarily something Ukrainians are going to be able to count on. I think they know that, but I think they're also trying to prepare for that as well, Bianca.
Fred Pleitgen in Ukraine, thank you so much.